All right, so now we got another one for you guys. So there's two parts to this story. One, we're going to get to a clip in a second. Sean Hannity is calling for a threat of nuclear annihilation casually on his show. The reason why I love this audio clip too is because we're getting a throwback to like 2007. Bill O'Reilly's on Sean Hannity's radio show and they're debating.
Are you serious?
Glorious. I love it. I mean, this injected right into my veins. This is taking me back to, when I first started the show in 2012 or whatever. I love this.
Yeah.
Right?
This is the Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder of like 2004.
Correct. The old guard in among Republican commentators. But should we show that first or should we do the Trump thing first? I'll let you decide.
Yeah, show it. You
show the Hannity
Sean
first?
Hannity
Okay.
thing. Let's go with
All right,
that.
we'll get to Trump in a second, but listen to what Hannity said.
Boris Johnson came out this weekend, and he's the only one that said what I said. They're not fighting this war to win it. That means it becomes another quagmire, another Afghanistan.
Careful.
I don't want America in these long, protracted conflicts, Bill.
Well, either do I, but you've got to be careful with this because you've got an unstable dictator with nuclear weapons. You've got to be careful with this.
How do you be careful, Bill? We're going to give them money. We're going to give them tanks. We're going to escalate. And at what point do we say, we've got nuclear weapons too, Vladimir? You fire at us, we'll destroy you.
Come on.
I mean, he's being pretty clear there that we should effectively threaten nuclear war back. And when you make a guy like Bill O'Reilly go, oh, come on.
Right.
I mean, I think that says something. Now, by the way, the most disingenuous part of that, in my opinion, is that Hannity actually, as he's being a massive hawk and a neocon and pro-war and pro-escalation, earlier in the clip he says, look, I don't want another Iraq or Afghanistan. I don't want one of these long wars.
Right.
So threaten nuclear war with an unstable dictator who's, evidence that he's severely ill, and clearly he's unstable because everybody thought if he invades Ukraine, it's only going to be the eastern portion, and he invaded the entire country. I mean, I think this is insane. I think it's insane to say something like just threaten nuclear war back.
Yes, it is completely insane. And, it's just crazy to me how casual people are, too, about where we are in this conflict and the possibilities of this conflict. And they go on to have an exchange back and forth where O'Reilly actually credits the Biden administration. He's like, they've been incremental.
He says it's the only thing they've done right. That's what
he's got to make sure to take his shots while he's praising them for this incremental approach. There's I think a fiction that's being told in the media right now, too, of there was a lot of concern, including reportedly from the president, about a potential nuclear escalation coming from Russia because they've drawn these various red lines. And we've gone over them, Ukraine has gone over them, and there hasn't been a nuclear retaliation yet. So they're like, oh, well, must just all be a bluff. They haven't escalated, so we don't need to worry about it. And first of all, I think that's, I would be leery of jumping to that conclusion. And second of all, the idea that they haven't escalated at all is not accurate. I mean, they escalated by targeting the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, attacking Kyiv again, trying to make the winter as brutal and painful as possible for the Ukrainian people. So even this latest move of us deciding to send tanks after Germany basically pressured us into it, only 5 days ago, the Pentagon was like, no, we're not going to send these tanks. And if you remember early on in the war, it was we will only send defensive capabilities. Tanks were completely off limits because that's considered offensive capability. So anyway, I sort of dissent from both of them in the way that they are viewing this entire conflict. But the idea that the response to Russia's insane nuclear threats is to issue our own insane nuclear threats is terrifying.
So Hannity is saying, basically, the tanks aren't enough.
Yeah.
That's his argument. And O'Reilly's saying, actually, the tanks are a good idea.
Yeah.
So that's what's considered the spectrum of reasonable debate.
So that's the Overton window. And so anybody who says man, I don't know about the tanks, then it's oh, you're a Putin puppet, a piece or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think a huge concern here is the tit for tat escalation, because eventually, if you just follow that logic, follow that path, eventually you get to a point where the next tit for tat escalation is
There's nowhere else to go.
It's World War III. Right. And that's not hyperbolic. That's actually very dry, straightforward reading and interpretation. I mean, look at what just happened with the doomsday clock. They moved it to 90 seconds to midnight or something like that.
Right.
So this is really serious. And it also bothers me how, blasé and casual and nonchalant everybody is about every time there's some new thing that happens. It's just what are you going to do? So I'm 100% on that page with you. But I'm also there's just no easy way out of this, right? Because part of me also says Russia invaded Ukraine.
Right.
Russia is the aggressor against Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, anything Ukraine does to defend itself is God bless. I'd do this exact same thing if I was in their shoes.
Of course.
So, but then you look at, so us helping to facilitate them defend themselves, on the one hand, it's a good thing because you want them to be able to defend themselves. But on the other hand, it's a bad thing because then we're in a proxy war with Russia, which means we're right next to World War III. So it's just, there's no easy way out of this. There are no good answers. And I think people are very glib at, when they're like, oh, easy. This is simple. Like Hannity goes on in that clip at the end to be like, it's easy. Do this.
Well,
it's easy. Is it easy, Sean? Is it easy dealing with this, dealing with geopolitics and potential World War III and a proxy war? Is that easy? Numbnuts.
Our favorite former president, Donald Trump, also thinks this is easy. I'll get to that in a minute. But one last thing on the tanks, because this was really striking to me. This was from a Politico article about how the U.S. flipped its decision and ended up deciding to send these Abrams tanks. Basically, Germany was under a lot of pressure to send tanks. They didn't want to do it because they didn't want to be out on a limb by themselves and be subject to potential Russian retaliation. So they're like, we're only sending them if the U.S. also sends them. And the quote here from this article is Olaf Scholz, who's the Chancellor of Germany, says, he's been adamant in his discussions with Biden that supplying Leopard tanks to Ukraine marks such a qualitatively new step that the U.S. is the world's biggest military power, but also Germany's guarantee for nuclear deterrence must be involved. So just to give people context of what a serious step this deciding to send the tanks and reversing, again, the decision that they've been making all the way along. There was reporting just 5 days ago that all the military brass was like, no, do not do this.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
This was such a significant step that Germany was not willing to do it alone, and they wanted to make sure that they had Germany's guarantee for nuclear deterrence. And yet, again, to talk about you may support the tanks, you may not support the tanks. The fact that this is basically not really debated here, that you're really not allowed to even question the idea of whether this is the right direction to go in or not, is part of what I've objected to this whole time along with Ukraine. But don't worry, Kyle, because our former president says that this is all actually very easy to solve. He says on Truth Social, in all caps, first come the tanks, then come the nukes. Get this crazy war ended now. So easy to do.
So easy. So easy. Just fix it. I would simply fix it. We're going to make Ukraine great again. We're going to make Russia great again. It's going to be unbelievable, like nothing you've ever seen. Many people are saying this.
But, it's interesting from a political perspective because this is clearly, we're talking about Candace Owens shot across the bow. This man may be the Republican nominee. This is clearly a shot across the bow of something he is going to be saying on the campaign trail. Now, whether he means it or not is a totally different beast. But I think he sees this as a political fracture that he may be able to exploit to his benefit, both in the Republican primary. He's taken some shots at DeSantis, like kind of passive-aggressive shots at DeSantis on his foreign policy record. So he sees this as a potential angle in a Republican primary, but also general election.
But what exactly would his solution be? I'd love for him to explain. Of
course.
Trump he doesn't even know what the Donbass is, right? He's going to give us a detailed explanation because,
he's so good at saying things so confidently that mean nothing. This is like one of his special talents.
Yeah,
we're going to make a great deal.
I know, but I would love to get a little more specific because, like I said, there was a segment we did a while ago where I said, here's my proposed peace agreement. But even with what I thought was the least bad of all bad options, this could still go wrong in a million different ways.
Of course.
You don't want to make a deal and then Putin feels incentivized if this worked, I could just invade another former Soviet bloc country and then demand 30% of that land or whatever. You don't want to incentivize that. That's one thing that's a fear for people.
Yeah.
But the flip side is if you don't make some sort of a deal, what do you just want to have this war in perpetuity? Mm-hmm. And where does it end up? So there's no good answer. There's no easy answer. And this numbnuts is out there this is easy. Just do this. Just easy. Yeah. Well, do what? Do what? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Peace. Make a deal. Bring peace, Kyle.
I don't know. This is, I do not envy anybody in a position of power dealing with this war. Because again, there are no easy answers. What I want to ask you is this. We don't need to go too much into this, but did they send the longest range missiles yet?
No.
So they still haven't sent the longest range missiles. So that's Biden still sticking by
still hold
the original
Biden
mindset of we don't want to do anything that's going to be perceived as an escalation. That was the original idea. But with these tanks, So that you're saying effectively that falls in the same category as it's definitely going to be viewed as an escalation?
Yes. And Russia, I mean, they reacted immediately the same way. Their embassy in Germany denounced Berlin's extremely dangerous decision because remember, it was Germany doing this in partnership with us. They said that could draw Germany into the war. You know, the Russians can be very dramatic. They also compared this to like Nazi invasion of USSR and things like that. So, I mean, in terms of, they also called it a blatant provocation. So yes, they see it as an escalation. And, you know, it's fair to say they've drawn these red lines. They certainly haven't, you know, gone with an actual nuclear attack. I do think that they have escalated in response to choices that we have made on the battlefield. Now, you can say that the choices we've made are right or wrong, but to pretend like there hasn't been a response from Russia or that there never will be a response from Russia, I think is really foolhardy.
Yeah, but then the other thing, Hannity says at the end of the clip, like, Ukraine should actually shoot inside Russia's borders, you know? And no, like, I know he's a hawk and he's an idiot and he's a neocon, but then at the same time, it's like, Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah.
If they were to do that in response, it's like, I get why they're doing it. If somebody walks up to you at the bar and punches you in the face, you punch back.
I absolutely get why Ukraine would potentially do that. The question is if we want to be part of that war.
Yeah, well, that's the conundrum. It's like,
that's
so if we never gave any weapons to them at all, right? This thing would already be over. It would be Russia.
No doubt.
Would Russia have gotten all of Ukraine? Would Kyiv even have fallen?
I mean, because remember, it's not just what we supplied this time around, but we've been training them, supplying them. So the Obama administration started, but Trump really went, you know, much further and started directly training and shipping more aid and more weapons, which, you know, went against this idea that he was like soft on Putin and buddy with Putin. So, yeah, if we had done none of that, I don't think they would have stood a chance. And I still think if we pulled our support now, I mean, not just are they dependent on our military support, their economy is decimated. They're dependent on us for just basic functioning of their government. I don't know if you saw Zelensky fired like 5 cabinet ministers and 4 regional governors or something like that over corruption because they were caught getting these sweetheart deals, overcharging the military for food, going on lavish vacations.
So you mean like the entire military-industrial complex here in the U.S.?
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
But again, like, you know, so this is part of what we are. The only reason they're able to do that is because of our funds, basically. I mean, we're paying their paychecks at this point. They are completely dependent on us. So yeah, if we withdrew support, it would be over, and they know that. You know, I don't think there's any denying it.
You know who else is completely dependent on us?
Who?
Alabama, who, you know, they have, what was the story that came out a few years back? Like some worms in their water that only happens in like developing countries. Like their water infrastructure is so destroyed. Is it tapeworm? It's one of the worms. I don't remember which one, but it's like a parasite in their water that only exists in third world countries. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, yeah, they're like, yeah, Ukraine is ringworm.
No, not ringworm.
Tapeworm.
Tapeworm.
Dickworm.
It's some kind of worm.
Okay, some kind of worm. Right. So anyway, you get the point. Is that
I think AOC said ringworm and like got made fun of because that's common.
Ukraine is so dependent on us, but it's like, well,
hookworm.
So is Alabama. Hookworm. That's it. That's definitely it.
You don't want hookworm.
You don't want hookworm.
Or
no.
any other worm for that matter. Actually, ringworm. Little known fact. It's not actually a worm. It just looks like wormish.
I remember when you taught me that, my mind was blown.
Yeah, it's actually not a worm.
It's not a worm?
It looks wormish.
So why do they call it that?
If you're going to get a worm, make it ringworm.
They should just call it like
really a worm.
Red rash, circular rash.
I know. Why do you have to make it sound so horrible?
I hate it when people do stuff like that. If you have a choice of go with the intuitive thing or the non-intuitive thing, always go with the intuitive thing. Don't go with the thing that makes people think a step or two further.
Right. Yeah. Why did you freak people out like that?
It's just so obnoxious.
Yeah.
So obnoxious. Anyway, we're way off track here, but there you have it. Hannity calling for casual nuclear escalation.
No big deal.
And I would like to say on the record, I'm against that.
Yes. Same. All right. Let's get right to Ken Roth. As we said before, denied fellowship initially at Harvard over his criticism of Israel while he was head of Human Rights Watch. He was there for, I think, close to 3 decades. A long time former head of Human Rights Watch. Let's get right to it.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.